Welcome to Genesis Global Radio, the origin of information. And now here's your host, Christine Larkin.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into Genesis Global Radio, the origin of information. I'm your host, Christine Larkin. On today's segment, we'll be speaking with Kimberly Berg, male feminist artist, creator of the website IsisRising.net. He is the founder of what he calls modern Paleolithic art. He is interested in drawing attention to the prehistorical, pre-patriarchal period in human evolution. It was a time when women played a very important role in creating a civilization built on female values. They were social values based on respect for women, on a peaceful community free of war and bloodshed, on compassion for others, on a lifestyle lived in harmony with nature, and in a spirituality that permeated every facet of their daily life. I'd like to welcome back Kimberly Berg. Kim, thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us, do you see the artist as having a role in initiating or stimulating cultural change?
Yes, I do. The artist specializes in creating images. And by creating powerful images, the artist can create a way for the viewer that affects their way of looking at the world. And it's done primarily just by a visual experience. Mm-hmm. And this is important because the image that is created can have a very moving, emotional effect on people. And by creating images that cause a person to think, images that are compelling, he can create an alternative reality that may seem hypothetical at first, but may very well prove to be more true than the realities that we generally accept.
Yeah. Have you witnessed it all in relationships that you observe? Do you think men still dominate the relationship, or has that role changed a bit?
Well, I do see it in life. I live in a very rural area. I live in a cabin that I built myself in the woods. Oh. And even when I drive down country roads, I often see men with baby strollers, and this is something I never saw before. Yeah. But it's starting to become more and more a part of the scene. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so this proves, that there are things taking place, right. Changes that are taking place that really are proving to us that women are starting to get to men and trying to educate them that they have a role to play as well.
Mm-hmm. That their voice needs to be heard. And it's no longer frowned upon for a man to be the mother, at home, and the woman out working.
Yes, I know several families like that. Mm-hmm. And even now, I've read articles where it shows that women are now not only the breadwinners, but they're making more money than their counterparts.
Right. So, Kim, tell us, why do you believe understanding women's prehistorical record is important in the modern-day world?
Well, it's important because it shows that at one time women developed a culture of their own that is completely different from what we experience today. And not only that, but women were in control of their life, and they acted out of self-confidence that what they were doing, they could do almost anything they wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And it's not just how they lived, but they were very innovative. And one example I like to bring out is bread. most people have no idea, when bread was first developed. And it turns out that it was first invented in the Neolithic period.
Oh, really?
Over 5,000 years ago. And if you've ever tried to bake bread, it's an art in itself.
Absolutely.
And to do that, you have to have the right wheat grain, and they were very good at developing different strains of seeds, and one of them being wheat. So they found a wheat grain that could, when turned into flour, could create a dough which could be acted upon by a certain strain of yeast that produces a gas that causes the dough to rise at a certain temperature. It has to be the right temperature, the right moisture. And then they also invented the oven to bake the bread. And in Katahuyu, where one of the very first Neolithic villages to appear after the Paleolithic period, every household had an oven along with the hearth. So we know that bread was a very important part of their diet and of their living.
Of their lifestyle, that term breaking bread to sort of come together.
Like, in Italy, the way I understand it, the first thing you do in the morning is you take a trip to the bakery and you get a loaf of bread.
That's right.
And bring it home.
Yep.
And in Russia, I think it's very much the same way. So even today, bread is still an important staple of our diet.
Sure. Yeah. Can hardly have a meal without it, a sandwich.
Well, the thing is, women, most of the development that they were undergoing at this time was inspired by the fact that they were actually caring for their children. They were doing everything they could to benefit the child, and as a result, they were making huge changes in civilization that were inspired basically by their child care. For instance, they did a lot of work finding herbs that could be used, had medicinal properties to take care of their children if they got sick or had any problems. They also created clothing for their children so their children would be warm and wouldn't be suffering from the cold. They developed sewing so that they could sew different hides together originally, but then different fabrics. They invented, they actually developed cotton and shearing of sheep for coal. Not so much cotton, but they did, when they were domesticating different animals, one of the animals that they domesticated was the sheep. And they learned how to shear the sheep and create wool for their clothing.
Amazing. And, they were home raising the children, protecting the family while the men were typically out hunting. We know this. When do you think the recognition of all that changed? And also, where do you see women's role in the future of our current culture and society?
Well, it's going to be a slow progress. One thing that I have observed that unless women are able to achieve more political power, there's not going to be very many changes taking place. Everything depends on politics at this point. And we can see in Congress right now, the so-called war on women, men are still in charge of controlling women's lives.
Yeah.
And until that changes, women are going to have to really struggle. Not only that, but women are divided themselves. Not everyone supports feminist issues.
That's right.
And until women are able to work together, not much change can occur either. And
do you
another thing, I don't believe that, I think real change will happen when men get involved. Because when men get involved, then it will prove that many of the assumptions that we have towards women will no longer be credible.
Right.
And then we will see some progress.
You made a very important point there that women are divided in feminist issues. There are women who take it to an extreme, and there are women who like to be feminine. I watched something on the History Channel recently about Hugh Hefner. There were women who enjoyed working in the clubs with him, and there are women who were staunchly against it. So there's that middle ground that we need to come together on. Is that middle ground still kind of a gray area?
Oh, yes, yes. And if you read Rhiannon Eisler again, she doesn't really document, but she does go back and explain that it seems whenever women achieve any kind of headway regarding their rights and their equality, there's always a very severe backlash coming from the male patriarchal rulership.
Yeah.
And what we're experiencing right now is sort of a backlash to what happened in the 60s.
Yep, we sure are.
Well, see, that's what I mean. Women have to acquire political power.
Yeah.
It's not going to change until that happens.
Right.
And right now we have only 7 women in the Senate.
Yeah.
And I think like 49 in the House. And until those numbers are increased, you're not going to see a whole lot of change.
Yeah. Well, hope springs eternal. So go on the beautiful website that Kim has built, www.isisrising.net, ISISRISING.net, and you'll see his beautiful, beautiful feminine art. It is really some of the most beautiful art that I've seen in a very long time. Also inspired by Degas. His email is kdegas@artlover.com. That's KDEGAS @artlover.com. So in closing, you said you weren't painting as much, but are you thinking of anything right now?
I just finished a painting realistic as possible. In that way, you can lead the viewer into a space that they are not familiar with, but starting them out in something they are familiar with.
All right. Well, we're out of time for this segment, unfortunately. Thank you so much, and continued success with your work.
Thank you very much.
I'm your host, Christine Larkin. Thank you for tuning in to Genesis Global Radio, the origin of information.
For upcoming segments, log on to www.genesisglobalmedia.com and keep your finger on the pulse of the hottest brands on the planet.